Step aboard the Sapphire Yacht, where luxury hides a deadly secret. When Sir Reginald Haverford is found stabbed under the stars, Hercule Poirot, the master detective, unravels a web of lies among a glittering cast. His icy widow, a debt-ridden heir, a cunning widow, and more. With a missing sapphire, a staged scream, and clues like a silk thread and a dab of cream, Poirot's little grey cells race against time to expose a killer. Will you guess the truth before the shocking reveal? Chapter 1. The Sapphire Yacht. The late summer sun hung low over the English Channel, casting a golden sheen across the waves that lapped gently against the hull of the Sapphire Yacht. The vessel, a marvel of polished teak and gleaming brass, bobbed serenely off the coast of Devon, its silhouette a proud testament to the wealth and taste of its owner, Sir Reginald Haverford. The yacht was moored a mile from shore, far enough to feel like a world apart, yet close enough for the faint lights of Torquay to twinkle on the horizon as dusk crept in. It was the third day of what was to be a week-long voyage, a carefully curated gathering of society's elite, and the air was thick with the hum of polite conversation, clinking glasses, and the occasional ripple of laughter. Captain Arthur Hastings, retired from his military days and now a steadfast companion to the great detective Hercule Poirot, stood at the starboard rail, his hands clasped behind his back. He was a man of simple pleasures, content to watch the sea and breathe in the salt air, but his mind was not entirely at ease. There was something about the gathering aboard the Sapphire Yacht that felt off. It was not the opulence. Hastings was accustomed to the extravagance of the upper crust, but rather the undercurrent of tension that seemed to pulse beneath the surface of every smile and gesture. He glanced at the assembled guests, their figures illuminated by the soft glow of lanterns strung along the deck. Sir Reginald Haverford, a portly man in his late 50s, with a florid complexion and a penchant for loud waistcoats, held court near the stern. His booming voice carried over the murmur of the waves, regaling his guests with tales of his latest business triumphs in the city. His young wife, Lady Evelyn Haverford, stood beside him, her delicate frame swathed in a gown of emerald silk that caught the light like the sea itself. She was no more than 30, with a porcelain beauty that seemed almost too perfect, and her eyes, sharp, watchful, darted about the deck as if cataloguing every movement. Nearby, Dr. Lionel Baxter, a physician of some repute, sipped his whiskey with a distracted air. His thin face, framed by wire-rimmed spectacles, betrayed a certain weariness, as though the weight of his profession, or perhaps something more personal, pressed heavily upon him. Rhythmically, she was Sir Reginald's cousin, invited, it was said, out of familial obligation rather than affection. Her sharp tongue and sharper eyes had already made her a figure to be avoided by the younger guests. The younger set included Roger Langley, a dashing barrister with a reputation for charm and a rumoured gambling habit, and his fiancée, Miss Beatrice Langley, a vivacious heiress whose laughter rang out like a bell. Beatrice's brother, Charles Vernon, lounged against the rail, his dark eyes fixed on the horizon, as though he longed to be anywhere but here. And then there was Mrs. Violette Dubois, a French widow of mysterious origins, whose sultry voice and enigmatic smile had already drawn the attention of every man aboard, much to Lady Evelyn's evident displeasure. Hastings sighed, adjusting his tie. A fine lot, he muttered to himself, though he could not shake the feeling that this idyllic voyage was a stage, and the players were hiding their true roles. He turned his gaze to the sea, hoping to clear his mind, when a soft cough interrupted his thoughts. "Monsieur Hastings," came a familiar voice, precise and accented. "You are, as always, lost in the contemplation of the vast and unknowable, are you not?" Hastings turned to find Hercule Poirot standing beside him, his small, neat figure immaculate in a cream-colored suit, his moustache waxed to perfection. His green eyes sparkled with amusement, but there was a sharpness to them that Hastings knew well, a sign that Poirot's little grey cells were already at work. "Poirot!" Hastings exclaimed, a grin breaking across his face. "I didn't expect you until tomorrow. How did you get here?" Poirot waved a hand dismissively. "A small matter of a motorboat, arranged by our gracious host. Sir Reginald insisted that I join the party early, and who am I to refuse such an invitation? But tell me, Hastings, what is it that troubles you? Your face, it is like an open book, and the story it tells is one of unease." Hastings hesitated, then gestured towards the guests. "It's nothing I can put my finger on, Poirot. Just a feeling. Everyone's so polished, but there's something beneath it all. Secrets, perhaps." Poirot's eyes narrowed, and he nodded slowly. "Secrets, mon ami, are the currency of such gatherings, and where there are secrets, there is often danger. But come, let us join the others. I wish to observe these players in their little drama." They moved towards the main deck, where Sir Reginald was now holding forth about a rare sapphire he had recently acquired. A gem, he claimed, worth a king.
Mention the sapphire.
Dinner was announced, and the party moved below decks to the yacht's opulent dining salon. The table was set with crystal and silver, and the meal, a 7-course affair prepared by a French chef, was a triumph of culinary art. Yet as the courses came and went, Hastings could not shake his sense of disquiet. The conversation was lively, but there were undercurrents. A barbed remark from Miss Winthrop about Sir Reginald's business dealings, a fleeting look of disdain from Lady Evelyn towards Mrs. Dubois, a tense exchange between Roger Langley and Charles Vernon about a debt unpaid. As the dessert plates were cleared, Sir Reginald rose, tapping his glass with a spoon. "My friends," he said, his voice rich with satisfaction, "tonight is a night for celebration. Tomorrow I shall unveil the Haverford sapphire, a jewel that will be the envy of all who see it. But for now, let us toast to good company and fair winds." The guests raised their glasses, but before the toast could be completed, a piercing scream cut through the air. It came from the deck above, sharp and desperate, followed by a heavy thud. The room froze, glasses poised in midair, as every eye turned towards the sound. Hastings was on his feet in an instant, Poirot close behind. They raced up the narrow staircase to the deck, the other guests trailing in a flurry of silk and panic. There, sprawled on the polished teak, lay Sir Reginald Haverford, his face contorted in a grimace of pain, a dark stain spreading across his white shirt. A dagger, its hilt glinting in the lantern light, protruded from his chest. Lady Evelyn screamed again, collapsing into Roger Langley's arms. Dr. Baxter pushed forward, kneeling beside the body, but his examination was brief. "He's dead," he said, his voice flat. "Stabbed through the heart." Poirot stepped forward, his expression unreadable. He knelt beside the body, his gloved fingers hovering over the dagger without touching it. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, his eyes scanning the scene with the precision of a watchmaker. "The drama, it has begun." Hastings looked at the faces around him. Shock, fear, and something else, something darker, flickering in the eyes of the assembled guests. The sapphire yacht, once a haven of luxury, was now a stage for murder, and Hercule Poirot was at its center. "Hastings," Poirot said softly, rising to his feet, "fetch the ship's log and the list of all aboard. We must know precisely who was where at the moment of this crime. The little grey cells, they are awake, and they demand answers." As the guests whispered and the sea whispered back, Hastings knew that this was no ordinary murder. The sapphire yacht was a closed circle, a world unto itself, and somewhere among its glittering passengers lay a killer.
Polished teak, as the guests stood frozen around Sir Reginald Haverford's lifeless form. The sea, indifferent to the tragedy, lapped gently against the hull, its rhythm a stark contrast to the chaos above. Captain Arthur Hastings, his heart pounding, felt the weight of the moment settle over him like a fog. The air was thick with the scent of salt and blood, and the eyes of the assembled company darted nervously, each seeking reassurance, or perhaps accusation, in the faces of the others. Hercule Poirot stood apart, his small figure a still point in the storm of emotion. His green eyes, sharp and unyielding, surveyed the scene with a calm that Hastings both admired and found faintly unnerving. Poirot's gloved hands were clasped behind his back, and his head tilted slightly as he studied the dagger protruding from Sir Reginald's chest. The weapon was an ornate thing, its hilt inlaid with what appeared to be mother-of-pearl, and it seemed grotesquely out of place in the opulence of the yacht. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice low but commanding. "The log, if you please, and the list of passengers and crew. We must establish the facts before the emotions cloud the truth." Hastings nodded, grateful for a task to anchor his racing thoughts. He hurried below decks to the captain's quarters, where the ship's log was kept in a mahogany desk. The yacht's captain, a grizzled man named Barrett, was already there, his face pale as he scribbled notes in the logbook. "Captain Barrett," Hastings said, "I need the log and a complete list of everyone aboard. Passengers, crew, everyone." Barrett looked up, his eyes haunted. "A bad business, Captain Hastings. Sir Reginald was a hard man, but to end like this—" He shook his head, handing over the log and a neatly typed list. 15 souls aboard, including the crew. Everyone's accounted for, far as I know." Hastings took the documents and returned to the deck, where Poirot had begun to organize the scene with the precision of a conductor. The guests had been ushered to one side, their voices a low murmur of fear and speculation. Lady Evelyn Haverford sat on a cushioned bench, her face buried in a handkerchief, though Hastings noted her eyes were dry. Dr. Lionel Baxter stood nearby, his hands clasped tightly as if to steady himself. Miss Clara Winthrop, her knitting abandoned, watched the proceedings with a hawk-like intensity, her lips pursed in disapproval. Roger Langley and Beatrice Langley stood close together, their faces pale, while Charles Vernon leaned against the rail, his expression unreadable. Mrs. Violette Dubois, her dark eyes gleaming, seemed almost detached, as though observing a play rather than a tragedy. Poirot addressed the group, his voice clear and authoritative. "Mesdames et messieurs, a terrible crime has been committed. Sir Reginald Haverford is dead, and the hand that struck him is among us. And no one may leave. I, Hercule Poirot, will uncover the truth, but I require your cooperation. Each of you will be questioned, and each of you must speak the truth." A ripple of unease passed through the group. Roger Langley cleared his throat. "Surely, Monsieur Poirot, this is a matter for the police. We're only a mile from shore. We could summon them at once." Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign Hastings recognized as mild amusement. "Monsieur Langley, the police will come in time, but the sea is a fickle mistress, and evidence is fleeting. The truth must be preserved now before it is lost to panic or deceit. Besides," he added, his eyes narrowing, "who among you would wish to delay justice?" No one answered, but the silence was heavy with unspoken thoughts. Poirot turned to Dr. Baxter. "Doctor, you examined the body. What can you tell us?" Baxter adjusted his spectacles, his voice steady but strained. "The wound is deep, straight to the heart. Death was instantaneous, or near enough. The dagger is unusual, decorative, not a common weapon. I'd estimate the time of death to be no more than 10 minutes ago, around 15 p.m. Poirot nodded, his gaze flicking to the ship's clock, mounted on the bulkhead. "Bon. And the scream we heard, was it before or after the fatal blow?" Baxter hesitated. "I'd say it came just before. The scream brought us all running, and Sir Reginald was still twitching when I reached him." Lady Evelyn let out a choked sob, and Roger Langley placed a protective arm around her. Poirot's eyes lingered on the gesture, before he turned to Captain Barrett, who had joined them on deck. "Captain,
Where were you at 9:15? Barrett stiffened.
In my quarters, updating the log. I heard the scream and came at once.
And the crew? Poirot pressed.
3 men, cook, steward, and engineer. They were below decks preparing for the night. I can vouch for them.
Poirot's expression gave nothing away. We shall verify all alibis in due course. For now, let us secure the scene. Captain Hastings, assist me if you please. Together, they cordoned off the area around Sir Reginald's body, using rope from the ship's stores. Poirot examined the deck carefully, his movements precise and deliberate. He noted the position of the body, sprawled near the starboard rail, one arm flung out as if reaching for something. A few feet away, a glass of whiskey lay shattered, its contents pooling on the teak. Poirot crouched, his eyes narrowing as he studied a small, damp patch on the deck, separate from the whiskey spill.
Curious,
he murmured. This is not whiskey. It is water, perhaps? Or something carries casually. Do you think it was brought aboard specifically for this?
Poirot straightened, his expression inscrutable.
Perhaps, Hastings, or perhaps it was already here, a silent witness to the intentions of its owner. We must learn more about this yacht and its treasures.
The guests were growing restless, their whispers turning to murmurs of protest. Miss Winthrop stepped forward, her voice sharp.
Monsieur Poirot, this is intolerable. Are we to be treated as criminals? I was in the salon, knitting, when the scream came. I saw nothing, heard nothing, except that dreadful noise.
Poirot regarded her calmly.
Mademoiselle Winthrop, your indignation is noted, but the truth does not yield to impatience. Where were you seated in the salon?
She blinked, momentarily thrown.
By the window, near the stern. I like the light for my knitting.
And you saw no one leave the salon before the scream?
No one,
she said firmly, though her fingers twitched as if longing for her needles. Poirot turned to the others.
I will speak with each of you in turn, in the privacy of the captain's quarters. For now, remain on deck, under the watch of Captain Barrett. Touch nothing, disturb nothing.
As the guests dispersed, Hastings leaned close to Poirot.
What do you make of it, old chap? It's a devil of a puzzle.
Poirot's eyes gleamed.
A puzzle, yes, but one with a solution, Hastings. The dagger, the scream, the spilled glass. These are the threads of a tapestry. We must weave them together, but carefully, for one false stitch will unravel all.
The interviews began in the captain's quarters, a small room lined with nautical charts and polished wood. Poirot sat behind the desk, his notebook open, his pen poised. Hastings stood by the door, watching as each guest entered, their faces a mix of defiance, fear, and calculation. Lady Evelyn was first, her composure fragile but intact.
I was with my husband all evening,
she said, her voice trembling.
We were on deck, admiring the stars, when he said he needed to fetch something from our cabin. I stayed behind, and then I heard the scream.
Poirot's pen scratched across the page.
And what time was this, madame?
Just before 9:15, I think. I didn't check my watch.
And you saw no one else on deck?
She hesitated, her eyes flickering.
No one.
Poirot nodded, dismissing her gently. As she left, Hastings whispered,
She's hiding something, Poirot. Did you see that pause?
Poirot smiled faintly.
The little grey cells, they notice everything, mon ami. Now let us continue. The truth is a shy creature, but we shall coax it into the light. As the night deepened, the Sapphire yacht became a crucible of suspicion, each guest a potential killer, each alibi a fragile...
This glittering world. Chapter 3. The Arrival of Poirot. The captain's quarters aboard the Sapphire yacht were a study in nautical precision, with polished brass fittings and charts neatly pinned to the walls, their lines tracing the invisible paths of the sea. The room was dimly lit by a single lamp, its glow casting Hercule Poirot's shadow across the desk where he sat, his notebook open and his pen moving with deliberate care. Captain Arthur Hastings stood by the door, his arms crossed, watching as Poirot conducted his interviews with the methodical calm of a surgeon. The air was heavy with the weight of suspicion, and the distant lapping of the waves seemed to mock the gravity of the moment. The murder of Sir Reginald Haverford had transformed the yacht into a floating prison, its opulence now a gilded cage for the 15 souls aboard. Poirot, summoned to the yacht at Sir Reginald's request for reasons as yet unclear, had arrived only hours before the crime, his presence an unexpected stroke of fortune, or perhaps, Hastings mused, something more calculated. Poirot's reputation as a detective was legendary, and it was not beyond imagining that Sir Reginald had anticipated trouble. But what kind, and from whom? The interviews continued, each guest ushered in one by one, their faces a gallery of emotions, fear, defiance, and in some cases a curious detachment. Poirot's questions were deceptively simple, his tone polite but probing, as though he were peeling back the layers of a particularly complex onion. Hastings marveled at his friend's ability to make the mundane reveal the profound, to turn a casual remark into a thread that might unravel the entire mystery. Roger Langley was next, his handsome features set in a mask of practiced charm. The barrister sat across from Poirot, his posture relaxed, but his eyes wary. "Monsieur Langley," Poirot began, his voice smooth as silk, "you were on deck when the scream was heard, were you not?" Langley nodded, running a hand through his dark hair. "Yes, I was with Beatrice, Miss Langley, my fiancée. We were near the bow, talking. The scream came from the other side of the yacht, and we ran toward it at once." "And what time was this, precisely?" Poirot's pen hovered over his notebook. Langley frowned, glancing at his watch, as if it might supply the answer. "I'd say around 9:15. I didn't check the exact time, but it was just after we finished dinner." Poirot's moustache twitched. "And during dinner, did you notice anything unusual about Sir Reginald? His mood, perhaps, or his interactions with others?" Langley hesitated, his fingers drumming lightly on the arm of his chair. He seemed his usual self, boisterous, full of stories about his business deals and that blasted sapphire.
Monsieur Langley, what is your connection to Sir Reginald? A friend? A business associate? Langley's smile was tight. A bit of both, I suppose. I've advised him on some legal matters in the past. He was a generous client. Generous, but perhaps not always agreeable, Poirot suggested, his tone mild. Langley's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Poirot made a note, then dismissed him with a nod. As Langley left, Hastings leaned close. "He's hiding something, Poirot. That business about Sir Reginald's mood, it felt rehearsed." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "The little grey cells, they are in agreement, Hastings. Monsieur Langley is a man who plays his cards close to his chest, but we shall see his hand in time." Next came Beatrice Langley, her vibrant energy dimmed by the evening's events. Her auburn hair was slightly dishevelled, and her eyes, usually bright with mischief, were clouded with unease. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "this is all so dreadful. Sir Reginald was, well, not the kindest man, but to be murdered like that." Poirot leaned forward, his gaze gentle but piercing. "Mademoiselle, tell me about your evening. Where were you when the scream was heard?" "With Roger near the bow," she said quickly. "We were talking about our engagement, planning the wedding. It was such a lovely night until—" She trailed off, her hands twisting in her lap. "And before the scream, did you see Sir Reginald or anyone else on deck?" Beatrice shook her head. "No, we were alone. The others were still in the salon, I think. I didn't see anyone until we heard the scream and ran toward it." Poirot made another note, his pen scratching softly. "And your brother, Monsieur Vernon, where was he?" Beatrice's eyes flickered, a momentary hesitation that did not escape Poirot's notice. "Charles? I think he was in the salon. He doesn't care for the sea, you know. He's been moody all trip." Poirot nodded, dismissing her with a courteous smile. As she left, Hastings muttered, "She's protecting her brother, isn't she?" That pause when you mentioned Charles, it was telling. Precisimo.
Poirot said, his eyes narrowing. "The family ties, they are strong, but they can also be chains. We must learn more about Monsieur Vernon." The interviews continued, each guest offering their version of the evening's events. Charles Vernon claimed to have been in the salon, brooding over a glass of brandy, and denied seeing Sir Reginald leave. Mrs. Violette Dubois, with her enigmatic smile, said she had stepped onto the deck for air just before the scream, but saw nothing unusual. Miss Clara Winthrop reiterated her claim of knitting by the salon window, her tone sharp with indignation at being questioned. Dr. Baxter, calm but visibly shaken, confirmed he had been in the salon, discussing a medical journal with
Barrett. As the last guest left, Poirot closed his notebook and leaned back, his fingers steepled. "Hastings," he said, "what do you make of these alibis?" Hastings frowned, running a hand through his hair. "They're all so tidy. Everyone claims to have been somewhere else, but no one saw Sir Reginald leave the salon. And that dagger, it's not the sort of thing you'd find lying about. Someone brought it, or knew where to find it." Poirot nodded, his eyes distant. "The dagger, it is a clue of great significance. Its presence suggests premeditation, yet its ornate nature suggests it was not chosen for convenience. And then there is the matter of the scream. Why did it come before the blow, as Dr. Baxter believes? And the damp patch on the deck, what does it tell us?" Hastings shook his head, feeling the puzzle's complexity tighten around him. "It's a devil of a mess, Poirot. Any one of them could have done it. Lady Evelyn stands to inherit. Langley might have had a business dispute, and Vernon, well, he's got a shifty look about him." Poirot smiled faintly. "You see, Hastings, but you do not observe. The truth lies not in the faces, but in the contradictions. The little grey cells, they are beginning to form a picture, but it is not yet complete. We must return to the scene." They stepped back onto the deck, where the body had been covered with a tarp at Poirot's instruction. The guests had been confined to the salon, under Captain Barrett's watchful eye. Poirot knelt beside the tarp, lifting it carefully to examine the dagger once more. "Curieux," he murmured. "The angle of the wound. It suggests a blow from someone of similar height to Sir Reginald, or perhaps slightly taller. And the hilt, it is not smeared with blood, as one might expect from a struggle." Hastings peered over his shoulder. "You think it was a clean strike? No fight?" "Précisément," Poirot said. "The killer was swift, confident, and yet, the scream, it complicates matters. We must speak to the crew next, Hastings. The cook, the steward, the engineer, they too are part of this tapestry." As they moved toward the crew's quarters, Hastings felt a chill that had little to do with the night air. The Sapphire yacht was a world unto itself, its secrets locked within the hearts of its passengers and crew. Poirot, with his relentless logic and piercing insight, was the only one who could unlock them. But the path to the truth was fraught with shadows, and the killer was watching, waiting for a misstep. Chapter 4. The questions begin. The Sapphire yacht lay still under the starlit sky, its lanterns casting a soft glow across the deck where the tragedy had unfolded only hours before. The air was heavy with the scent of the sea and the lingering tension of suspicion. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the loyal companion, stood by the door, his military bearing softened by the unease that gnawed at him. The murder of Sir Reginald Haverford had cast a pall over the yacht, transforming its opulent confines into a stage for a grim drama, and Poirot was now its director, methodically probing the cast for the truth. The interviews with the guests had yielded a tapestry of alibis, each neatly woven yet frayed at the edges. Poirot's little grey cells were at work, cataloguing every word, every pause, every flicker of expression. Now, he turned his attention to the crew, whose roles, though less glamorous, were no less critical to the puzzle. The cook, the steward, and the engineer. 3 men whose presence below decks might hold the key to unlocking the mystery. Poirot summoned the crew one by one, beginning with the cook, a wiry man named Thomas Finch. Finch entered the quarters with a nervous shuffle, his apron stained with the remnants of the evening's 7-course meal. His weathered face bore the marks of a life spent in service, and his eyes darted to Hastings before settling on Poirot. "Monsieur Finch," Poirot began, his voice calm and precise. "You were in the galley at the time of the scream, oui?" Finch nodded, wiping his hands on his apron. "Aye, sir. I was cleaning up after dinner, prepping for breakfast. Heard the scream at about 9:15, I reckon. Ran up to the deck with the others. And before the scream, did you see Sir Reginald or anyone else near the galley?" Finch shook his head. "No, sir. The galley's below decks, near the stern. The passengers don't come down there, except maybe the steward fetching something. I was alone." Poirot's pen scratched across the page. "And the dagger, Monsieur Finch. Have you seen such a weapon aboard the yacht? It is ornate, with a mother-of-pearl hilt." Finch's brow furrowed. "Can't say I have, sir. We've got kitchen knives, of course, but nothing fancy like that. Sounds like something from the captain's collection, maybe." Poirot's eyes sharpened. "The captain's collection? Explain, if you please." Finch shifted uncomfortably. "Captain Barrett, he's got a few old weapons, swords, daggers, that sort, kept in a locked case in his quarters. Says they're souvenirs from his Navy days, but I ain't seen them up close." Poirot made a note, his expression unreadable. "Merci, Monsieur Finch. You may go, but remain on deck with the others." As Finch left, Hastings leaned close. "A collection of weapons, Poirot? That's a lead worth following. If that dagger came from Barrett's case, someone had access to it." "Précisément, Hastings," Poirot said, his moustache twitching. "But access alone does not a murderer make." We pale, and his hands trembled slightly as he stood before Poirot. "Monsieur Riley," Poirot said, "you move freely about the yacht, serving the guests. Where were you at 9:15 this evening?" Riley swallowed hard. "I was in the salon, clearing the dessert plates. I heard the scream and ran up with everyone else. Didn't see nothing till we found Sir Reginald. Like that." "And before the scream, did you notice any of the guests leave the salon?" Riley hesitated, his eyes flickering. I don't think so, sir. It was busy, with everyone talking and laughing. I was focused on my work, but I did see Sir Reginald step out earlier, maybe 10 minutes before. Said he needed air." Poirot's pen paused. 10 minutes before the scream. And did he return to the salon?" "Not that I saw, sir," Riley said. "But I was in and out, fetching glasses and such." Poirot nodded, dismissing Riley with a wave. As the steward left, Hastings murmured, "That's the first confirmation of Sir Reginald leaving the salon. Lady Evelyn said he went to their cabin, but Riley places him on deck." "A discrepancy, Hastings," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. "The truth is like a mosaic. Each piece must fit perfectly, or the picture is distorted." The final crew member, the engineer, was a burly man named Henry Cole. His hands were calloused, his face lined with the grit of the engine room. "Monsieur Cole," Poirot began, "you were below decks in the engine room at the time of the scream." "Aye, sir," Cole said, his voice gruff. "Checking the engines, making sure all was running smooth. Heard the scream through the vents, came up quick as I could." "And did you see anyone near the engine room or the lower decks before the scream?" Cole shook his head. "No one, sir. The engine room's off limits to passengers. Only me and Captain Barrett go down there, and he was in his quarters." Poirot made a final note, then leaned back, his fingers steepled. "Merci, Monsieur Cole. You may join the others." As Cole left, Hastings paced the small room. "They all claim to have been busy, Poirot, but someone's lying. That dagger didn't walk itself to the deck." Poirot smiled faintly. "Patience, mon ami. The lies. They are like shadows. They reveal the shape of the truth by their absence. Let us now examine this collection of Captain Barrett's." They moved to the corner of the quarters where a locked glass case stood against the wall.
Captain Barrett, summoned at Poirot's request, unlocked it with a key from his pocket. Inside were several weapons, a naval cutlass, a pair of pistols.
This case locked, always. Only I have the key. And yet, Poirot said, the dagger found its way to the deck. Tell me, Captain, who has been in these quarters today? Barrett frowned, thinking. Just me, mostly. The steward came in to deliver my tea this afternoon, and Sir Reginald stopped by earlier, around 7 p.m., to discuss the itinerary. No one else. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Sir Reginald was here? And what was his demeanour? Agitated, Barrett said. Kept pacing, talking about the sapphire and how he needed to keep it safe. Said he'd invited you, Monsieur Poirot, because he suspected someone might try to steal it. Hastings' jaw dropped. Steal it? So he knew there was danger? Poirot nodded slowly. And yet, it was not the sapphire that was taken, but his life. Curious, is it not? They returned to the deck, where the guests remained under watch, their faces a mix of exhaustion and suspicion. Poirot addressed them briefly. Mesdames et messieurs, we have established the time of the crime, 9:15 p.m., and the weapon, a dagger from Captain Barrett's collection. Each of you has given an alibi, but alibis are like mirrors. They reflect what we wish to see. I, Hercule Poirot, will find the truth, and it will not be kind to the guilty. A murmur ran through the group, and Lady Evelyn's hand tightened on her handkerchief. Miss Winthrop's needles, retrieved from the salon, clicked furiously, as if knitting her indignation. Roger Langley whispered something to Beatrice, who nodded, her eyes darting to her brother Charles, who stood apart, his gaze fixed on the sea. As the guests were dismissed to their cabins under strict instructions to remain there, Poirot turned to Hastings. The net is cast, mon ami, but the fish are clever. Tomorrow we will examine the deck once more in the light of day. The damp patch, the shattered glass, the angle of the dagger, these are the notes of a symphony, and I shall play it to its conclusion. Hastings nodded, his mind racing. The sapphire yacht was a labyrinth of motives and secrets, and Poirot was its master navigator. But as the night closed in, the shadows seemed to deepen, and the killer, still hidden among them, watched with eyes as cold as the sea. Chapter 5. The Red Herrings. The dawn broke over the sapphire yacht with a deceptive calm, the sea shimmering under a pale sun that did little to warn the chill of suspicion that clung to the vessel. The deck, now cleared of Sir Reginald Haverford's body, which had been respectfully moved to a locked cabin under Captain Barrett's supervision, bore no trace of the violence that had occurred the previous night. Yet the memory of the murder hung heavy, like a storm cloud waiting to break. Hercule Poirot, immaculate in a fresh suit despite the early hour, stood at the starboard rail. His green Knight joined him, clutching a cup of tea provided by the anxious steward, James Riley. Poirot, Hastings said, his voice low. This business is getting under my skin. Everyone's alibi seems watertight, but someone's lying. And that dagger, taken from a locked case. It's as if the killer wanted to flaunt their cleverness. Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of amusement or irritation. Hastings could never quite tell. Mon ami, the killer is indeed clever, but not so clever as to escape the little grey cells. The dagger, the scream, the alibis, these are not the boasts of a showman, but the threads of a tapestry woven with care. And now we must seek the loose threads, the red herrings that distract from the truth. Hastings frowned, sipping his tea. Red herrings? You think someone's deliberately misleading us? Poirot nodded, his gaze fixed on the deck. In every murder, there is a moment where the obvious is too obvious. Let us see what the police would see, and then look beyond it. The local authorities had not yet arrived, delayed by a mechanical issue with their motorboat, but Captain Barrett had radioed for them at Poirot's insistence. In the meantime, Poirot had declared the yacht a preserved scene, forbidding anyone to touch the area where Sir Reginald had died. Now, in the clear light of morning, he resumed his examination, his movements precise and deliberate. He knelt beside the spot where the body had lain, his gloved fingers tracing the faint outline of the bloodstain, now cleaned but still faintly visible on the teak. The shattered whiskey glass had been collected as evidence, but Poirot's attention returned to the small damp patch he had noted the previous night, a few feet from where the body had fallen. He produced a magnifying glass from his pocket and studied the spot closely. "Hastings," he said, his voice sharp. "This patch, it is not water, as I first thought. It has a slight sheen, a faint residue. Perhaps oil or a cosmetic?" Hastings peered over his shoulder. "Oil? From the engine room, maybe? Or could it be something from one of the ladies' makeup?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "An excellent question, mon ami. We shall test it later. For now, note its position, separate from the whiskey spill, yet close to the body. It tells a story, but we must learn its language." As Poirot continued his inspection, the guests began to emerge from their cabins, their faces drawn with fatigue and unease. Lady Evelyn Haverford, dressed in mourning black, stood at the edge of the group, her expression a careful mask of grief. Roger Langley and Beatrice Langley, arm in arm, whispered to each other, their glances darting toward Charles Vernon. Needles clicking once more, sat on a deck chair, her sharp gaze missing nothing. Dr. Lionel Baxter, his spectacles glinting in the sunlight, hovered near the group, his hands clasped as if in prayer. Poirot gathered them in the salon, where the remnants of last night's dinner had been cleared, leaving the room stark and sombre. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "The investigation progresses, but the truth remains elusive. Each of you has given an alibi, but alibis are like shadows, they shift with the light. I ask now for your observations. Did anyone see Sir Reginald leave the salon last night, or notice anything unusual before the scream?" A murmur ran through the group, but it was Roger Langley who spoke first, his voice smooth but tinged with impatience. "Monsieur Poirot, I've said it before. I was with Beatrice at the bow. We didn't see Sir Reginald or anyone else until the scream. But if you're looking for someone with a motive, you might start with Charles Vernon." He cast a pointed glance at Beatrice's brother, who stiffened. Charles's eyes narrowed. "What's that supposed to mean, Langley? I was in the salon, same as most of you. I didn't even like Sir Reginald, but I had no reason to kill him." Beatrice stepped forward, her voice sharp. "Roger, that's unfair. Charles was nowhere near the deck when it happened." Poirot raised a hand, silencing the brewing argument. "Monsieur Vernon, you say you were in the salon. Who was near you at the time?" Charles hesitated, his jaw tight. "Miss Winthrop was knitting by the window. Dr. Baxter was reading. The steward was clearing plates. I don't recall anyone else." Miss Winthrop's needles paused, and she fixed Charles with a steely gaze. "I saw you, young man, pacing like a caged animal. You were muttering to yourself, and you kept looking at the door. Nervous, were you?" Charles flushed. "I was restless, that's all. This yacht feels like a trap." Poirot's eyes flickered with interest. "A trap, Monsieur Vernon? An interesting choice of words. And what, pray, did you wish to escape?" Charles said nothing, his lips pressed into a thin line. Poirot turned to Dr. Baxter. "Doctor, you were reading, oui? Did you notice Monsieur Vernon's agitation?" Baxter adjusted his spectacles, his voice measured. "I was engrossed in my journal, but yes, I recalled Charles pacing. He seemed preoccupied, but I didn't see him leave the salon." Poirot nodded, his pen scratching in his notebook. "And Madame Dubois, where were you just before the scream?" Mrs. Dubois's lips curved into a faint smile. "I stepped onto the deck for air, as I told you. The salon was stifling, and I needed a moment alone. I was near the stern, away from where Sir Reginald was found." "And you saw no one?" Weight of her words hanging in the air. Hastings, watching from the side, felt a prickle of suspicion. Miss Dubois's calm was almost too perfect, her answers too polished. He glanced at Poirot, who seemed to share his unease, though his expression remained inscrutable. As the guests dispersed,
Poirot pulled Hastings aside. "The red herrings, Hastings. They swim in abundance. Monsieur Vernon's agitation, Monsieur Langley's accusation, Madame Dubois' solitary stroll. These are the obvious clues designed to distract. But the truth lies in the subtle, the overlooked." They returned to the deck, where Poirot examined the rail near the damp patch. He ran his finger along the wood, then sniffed it, his brow furrowing. "This residue, it is not engine oil, it is perfume, perhaps, or a lotion? We must compare it to the possessions of the ladies aboard." Hastings's eyes widened. "Perfume? That could point to Lady Evelyn or Miss Dubois, or even Beatrice, but how would it end up there?" Poirot smiled faintly. "That, mon ami, is the question. And then there is the matter of the sapphire. Sir Reginald spoke of it last night, yet it was not on his person when he died. Where is it now?" Hastings frowned. "You think the murder was about the sapphire? A robbery gone wrong?" Poirot shook his head. "No, Hastings. The sapphire is a piece of the puzzle, but not the whole picture. The motive is deeper, more personal. We must look to the hearts of these people, their secrets, their grudges." As the morning wore on, the police finally arrived, their motorboat pulling alongside the yacht. A gruff inspector named Hargreaves took charge, his eyes narrowing at Poirot's presence. "Monsieur Poirot, I've heard of you, but this is a police matter now. We'll take it from here." Poirot bowed slightly, his smile polite but firm. "Of course, Inspector, but I am engaged by the late Sir Reginald's request. I shall continue my inquiries with your permission." Hargreaves grunted, clearly displeased but unwilling to challenge Poirot's reputation. As the police began their own examination, focusing on Charles Vernon as the obvious suspect due to his agitation and Langley's accusation, Poirot whispered to Hastings, "The police, they see the red herring and take the bait. But we, Hastings, we shall swim deeper." The Sapphire yacht remained a crucible of secrets, its passengers caught in a web of lies and half-truths. Poirot's mind, relentless and precise, was already piecing together the fragments, but the killer, hidden among the glittering cast, was watching, waiting for the next move. The midday sun cast a harsh light over the Sapphire yacht, its rays glinting off the polished brass concentration as he examined the spot where Sir Reginald Haverford had met his end. The bloodstain had been cleaned, but the memory of the crime lingered, etched into the teak and the minds of those aboard. Captain Arthur Hastings stood nearby, his hands clasped behind his back, watching Poirot with a mix of admiration and impatience. The police, under Inspector Hargreaves, were bustling about, taking measurements and questioning the crew. But Poirot's focus remained elsewhere, on the subtle details that the official investigation overlooked. "Poirot," Hastings said, his voice low, "the police seem awfully keen on Charles Vernon. That row he had with Sir Reginald over a debt, it's got Hargreaves convinced he's our man." Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of mild disdain. "The police, mon ami. They grasp at the obvious like a child reaching for a shiny bauble. Monsieur Vernon's debt is a motive, oui, but a motive alone does not make a murderer. We must look to the details, the small inconsistencies that whisper the truth." He knelt once more beside the rail, his magnifying glass in hand, his eyes fixed on the damp patch he had noted the previous night. The residue, now dried in the sunlight, was barely visible, but Poirot's scrutiny was relentless. He produced a small cloth and carefully scraped a sample, sealing it in a vial. "This," he said, holding up the vial, "is not perfume as I first thought, nor oil. It is something else, a cream, perhaps, or a lotion. We must compare it to the possessions of those aboard." Hastings frowned, his mind racing. A cream? Could it be something medical from Dr. Baxter or one of the ladies' cosmetics? Poirot nodded, his eyes gleaming. "An excellent thought, Hastings. We shall investigate. But first, Let us consider another detail, the shattered whiskey glass. He moved a few feet to where the glass had been found, its fragments now collected as evidence by the police. Poirot crouched, examining the deck with care. The glass fell here, away from the body, yet close enough to suggest Sir Reginald was holding it when he was struck. But why did it shatter so completely? A simple drop would not produce such fragments. Hastings rubbed his chin. You think it was thrown, or knocked out of his hand? Perhaps, Poirot said, his voice thoughtful. Or perhaps it was placed here after the fact, to suggest a struggle that did not occur. The angle of the dagger, the clean strike, it speaks of precision, not chaos. Poirot stood, brushing his gloves together, and turned his attention to the rail itself. He ran his fingers along the wood, pausing at a faint scratch, barely visible to the naked eye. Curieux, he murmured, this mark. It is fresh, and it aligns with the position of the body. A scuff, perhaps, from a shoe or something else. Hastings leaned closer.
Equipment. Poirot's smile was faint but sharp. Nothing, Hastings, is ever nothing in a murder. Every mark, every trace is a word in the story. This scratch, it speaks of contact, of movement. We must learn its context. They moved to the salon, where the guests were gathered under the watchful eye of Captain Barrett. The atmosphere was tense, the air thick with unspoken accusations. Inspector Hargreaves had just finished questioning Charles Vernon, whose sullen demeanour did little to dispel the suspicion hanging over him. Lady Evelyn Haverford sat in a corner, her black mourning dress stark against her pale skin, her eyes fixed on some distant point. Roger Langley and Beatrice Langley stood close together, their whispers barely audible. Mrs. Violette Dubois, poised as ever, sipped a cup of tea, her expression unreadable. Miss Clara Winthrop's knitting needles clicked relentlessly, a metronome of disapproval. Dr. Lionel Baxter, his spectacles fogged with the heat of the room, scribbled notes in a small journal, his hands unsteady. Poirot addressed the group, his voice clear and commanding. Mesdames et messieurs, the investigation progresses, but the truth requires your assistance. I am interested in a small detail, a cream or lotion, perhaps used by one of you. Have any of you applied such a substance recently? A ripple of surprise passed through the room. Lady Evelyn's hand tightened on her handkerchief, and she spoke first, her voice sharp. Monsieur Poirot, surely you don't think a face cream is relevant to my husband's murder? Poirot's eyes met hers, calm but unyielding. Madame, in a crime such as this, everything is relevant until proven otherwise. Do you use such a cream? She hesitated, then nodded. Yes, a moisturizing cream. I applied it last night in my cabin before dinner. And you, Madame Dubois? Poirot turned to the French widow, whose smile was as enigmatic as ever. I use a hand cream, she said, her voice smooth, but I applied it in my cabin after the incident. Beatrice Langley spoke up, her tone defensive. I have a lotion too, but I didn't use it last night. I was with Roger the whole time. Poirot's pen scratched in his notebook. Merci. And you, Mademoiselle Winthrop? The spinster's lips pursed. I have no need for such frivolities, Monsieur Poirot. My hands are accustomed to work, not pampering. Dr. Baxter cleared his throat, his voice hesitant. I carry a medical ointment for my hands. They get dry from constant washing. But I didn't use it last night. Poirot nodded, his expression giving nothing away. Bon, I shall need samples of these creams, if you please. Captain Hastings will collect them. As Hastings moved to gather the samples, he caught a glance.
The day was spent in quiet observation. Poirot, with Hastings at his side, visited the cabins of Lady Evelyn, Mrs. Dubois, Beatrice, and Dr. Baxter, collecting small samples of their creams and ointments. Each was stored in a labeled vial to be compared with the residue from the deck. Poirot also requested a detailed inventory of Sir Reginald's possessions, particularly the Haverford sapphire, which had yet to be located. As evening fell,
Poirot and Hastings returned to the captain's quarters to review their findings. Poirot spread out his notes, his eyes scanning the pages with relentless focus.
The residue, Hastings, it is the key. If it matches one of the creams, we will know who was near the body at the time of the murder. And the scratch on the rail, it suggests a moment of contact, perhaps a struggle, or perhaps something else.
Hastings leaned forward, his voice eager.
And the sapphire? If it's missing, that could be the motive. A thief caught in the act, maybe?
Poirot shook his head.
No, mon ami. The sapphire is a distraction, a red herring of the heart. The motive is not greed, but something deeper, betrayal perhaps, or vengeance. We must look to the relationships, the secrets that bind these people.
As they spoke, a knock came at the door. Captain Barrett entered, his face grim.
Monsieur Poirot, the police have searched Charles Vernon's cabin. They found a letter from Sir Reginald demanding repayment of a substantial loan, £10,000. Hargreaves is ready to arrest him.
Poirot's eyes narrowed.
A letter. Convenient, is it not, that it should be found so easily? No, Captain. Tell the inspector to wait. The little grey cells, they are not yet satisfied.
As Barrett left, Hastings turned to Poirot, his voice urgent.
Poirot, if Vernon's in debt to Sir Reginald, that's a strong motive. Why hold back?
Poirot's smile was faint but resolute.
Because, Hastings, the obvious is rarely the truth. The letter is a clue, but it is also a trap. We must look beyond it to the detail that does not fit.
Remained a labyrinth of deception. Its secrets coiled tightly within the hearts of its passengers. Poirot, with his unerring logic, was drawing closer to the truth, but the killer, hidden in plain sight, was watching, waiting for the moment to strike again. More lies surface. The sapphire yacht lay anchored under a sky bruised with clouds, the sea's restless murmur a constant reminder of its isolation. The second day since Sir Reginald Haverford's murder had dawned with a tension that coiled tighter with each passing hour. Hercule Poirot, his cream suit as pristine as ever, sat in the captain's quarters, his notebook a mosaic of facts, alibis, and inconsistencies. Captain Arthur Hastings paced.
Debt to Sir Reginald had cast him as the prime suspect, but Poirot, with his relentless focus on the subtle, saw a deeper truth lurking beneath the surface. Poirot, Hastings said, pausing by the desk, that letter in Vernon's cabin, it's damning. £10,000. No wonder Hargreaves is ready to clap him in irons. But you're holding back. Why? Poirot's green eyes gleamed, his fingers steepled. Mon ami, the letter is like a lighthouse. It draws the eye, but it blinds us to the shadows. It is too convenient, too perfectly placed. The little grey cells, they question its purpose. Was it left to accuse Monsieur Vernon, or to distract from another? Hastings frowned, rubbing his neck. You think someone planted it? But who, and why? Poirot's mustache twitched. That, Hastings, is what we must discover. The truth lies in the relationships, the hidden currents that flow between these people. Today, we shall stir those waters. They returned to the salon, where the guests were gathered, their faces drawn with fatigue and suspicion. The air was thick with the scent of coffee and the undercurrent of fear. Lady Evelyn Haverford sat by a window, her morning dress a stark contrast to her pale face, her eyes darting nervously. Roger Langley and Beatrice Langley stood close, their whispers tense. Charles Vernon, under the watchful eye of a police constable, glowered at the floor, his hands clenched. Mrs. Violette Dubois, her elegance undimmed, sipped tea with a calm that seemed almost defiant. Miss Clara Winthrop's knitting needles clicked relentlessly, a rhythm of disapproval. Dr. Lionel Baxter, his spectacles fogged, scribbled in his journal, his fingers unsteady. Poirot stood at the centre of the room, his presence commanding silence. Mesdames et messieurs, he said, his voice clear and precise. The investigation progresses, but the truth
is a shy creature. I have learned of a letter found in Monsieur Vernon's cabin, demanding repayment of a debt to Sir Reginald. But I ask you now, what other secrets bind you to the victim? Speak, for silence serves only the guilty. A murmur rippled through the group, eyes darting to Charles, who flushed with anger. "That's unfair, Poirot," he snapped. "Yes, I owed him money, but I didn't kill him. He was a bully, always lording his wealth over everyone. If anyone had a reason to hate him, it wasn't just me." Beatrice stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Charles, stop! You're making it worse. Monsieur Poirot, my brother's no murderer. Sir Reginald was difficult, yes, but Charles wouldn't do this." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Mademoiselle Langley, your loyalty is admirable."
Everyone saw how she flinched when he touched her. Lady Evelyn's head snapped up, her eyes blazing.
How dare you? My husband was not perfect, but I loved him. You're just trying to deflect suspicion, you debtor.
The room erupted in gasps, and Roger Langley stepped forward, his voice sharp. "That's enough, Vernon. Accusing a grieving widow, have you no shame?" Poirot raised a hand, silencing the room. "Enough. Accusations are like arrows. Aimed poorly, they wound all. Madame Haverford, is there truth in Monsieur Vernon's words? Was your marriage strained?" Lady Evelyn's lips trembled, and for a moment it seemed she might break. Then she straightened, her voice cold. "My marriage was private, Monsieur Poirot. Reginald was a demanding man, but I was faithful. I have nothing to hide." Poirot's pen scratched in his notebook, his expression unreadable. He turned to Mrs. Dubois, whose enigmatic smile had not faltered. "Madame, you were close to Sir Reginald, were you not? A friend, perhaps, or more." The room froze, every eye on Mrs. Dubois. Her smile widened, but her eyes were sharp. "Monsieur Poirot, you are bold. Sir Reginald was a charming man, and we spoke often. But I am a widow, not a fool. My friendships do not end in daggers." A nervous laugh escaped Beatrice, quickly stifled. Miss Winthrop's needles paused, her gaze piercing. "Some friendships," she said tartly, "are more dangerous than others. I saw you, Madame Dubois, whispering with Sir Reginald yesterday afternoon, near the stern. It looked intimate." Mrs. Dubois's eyes flashed, but her voice remained smooth. "Mademoiselle Winthrop, your imagination is as busy as your needles. We discussed the sapphire, nothing more." Poirot's interest sharpened. "The sapphire, madame. What did Sir Reginald say about it?" She shrugged, a delicate gesture. "He was proud of it, said it was his greatest treasure. He planned to show it to us all today. But he was nervous, as if he feared someone might take it." Poirot made a note, then turned to Dr. Baxter. "Doctor, you were Sir Reginald's physician. Did he confide in you about any fears or enemies?" Baxter adjusted his spectacles, his voice hesitant. "He was healthy, but yes, he mentioned concerns about his business dealings. He said someone was trying to ruin him, but he wouldn't name them. I thought it was just his usual bluster." Poirot nodded, his eyes scanning the room. "Merci. Each of you has added a piece to the puzzle, but the picture is not yet clear. I ask you now to remain in your cabins until dinner. The truth, a boiling pot. But we must be careful, Hastings. The killer is among them, and they grow nervous."
Poirot and Hastings returned to the deck, where the police were concluding their examination. Inspector Hargreaves approached, his face grim. "Monsieur Poirot, we found nothing new. The daggers from Barrett's collection and Vernon's debt is motive enough. I'm arresting him tonight, unless you've got something better." Poirot's smile was polite but firm. "Inspector, I urge patience. Arrest Monsieur Vernon and you may trap the wrong fish. Allow me one more day and the little grey cells will deliver the truth." Hargreaves grunted, clearly sceptical but nodded. "One day, Poirot. Then we act." As the inspector left, Poirot led Hastings to the rail, where he examined the faint scratch once more. "This mark," he said, "it is not from a shoe. It is too precise, too shallow. Perhaps a ring? Or a button? Hastings' eyes widened. A ring? Like the one Lady Evelyn wears? Or Mrs. Dubois' bracelet? Poirot nodded, his expression thoughtful. We must compare. And the cream, we have the samples. Tonight, we shall test them against the residue from the deck. They moved to the captain's quarters, where Poirot carefully examined the vials of cream and ointment collected from Lady Evelyn, Mrs. Dubois, Beatrice, and Dr. Baxter. Using a small chemical kit, he tested the residue from the deck, his movements precise. After a moment, he leaned back, his eyes gleaming. Mon Dieu, Hastings! The residue! It matches the hand cream of Madame Dubois! Hastings' jaw dropped. Mrs. Dubois? But she said she applied it in her cabin after the murder. Exactly, Poirot said, his voice soft but intense. Either she lies, or someone used her cream to mislead us. The scratch, the cream, the letter, these are the threads, and they are beginning to weave together. The Sapphire Yacht was a cauldron of secrets, its passengers bound by lies and motives that twisted like the sea. Poirot, with his unerring logic, was closing in, but the killer, sensing the tightening net, was growing desperate, their next move hidden in the shadows of the yacht's gilded halls. The Sapphire Yacht rocked gently on the evening tide, its lanterns casting a golden glow across the deck, as the second day since Sir Reginald Haverford's murder drew to a close. The air was thick with the scent of salt and the weight of unspoken truths, each passenger a player in a drama that grew more fraught with every hour. Hercule Poirot, his meticulous demeanour unshaken, sat in the captain's quarters, his notebook a labyrinth of notes and diagrams.
Investigation, but Poirot's calm suggested he saw more than he yet revealed. Poirot, Hastings said, turning from the porthole, that cream points straight to Mrs. Dubois. She said she applied it after the murder, but if it was on the deck, she was there when Sir Reginald was killed. Why aren't we confronting her? Poirot's green eyes gleamed, his fingers steepled. Mon ami, the evidence is a guide, not a master. The cream, it is a clue, but it may be a false one, placed to mislead. Madame Dubois is clever, too clever, perhaps, to leave such a trace by accident. We must proceed with care, for the truth is close, and the killer grows restless. Hastings frowned, his mind racing. You think someone used her cream to frame her? But who? And what about that scratch on the rail? A ring, you said? Or a button? Poirot nodded, his moustache twitching. The scratch, the cream, the letter in Monsieur Vernon's cabin, these are pieces of a puzzle, but they are not yet aligned. Tonight we shall stir the emotions, Hastings. The heart, when pressed, reveals what the mind conceals. Poirot had requested a gathering in the salon after dinner, a request that Inspector Hargreaves grudgingly allowed, though he remained convinced of Charles Vernon's guilt. The guests assembled, their faces a gallery of exhaustion, fear, and defiance. Lady Evelyn Haverford, her mourning dress immaculate, sat rigidly, her hands clasped tightly. Roger Langley and Beatrice Langley stood close, their eyes darting nervously. Charles Vernon, under the constable's watchful gaze, glowered at the floor, his fists clenched. Mrs. Violette Dubois, her elegance a stark contrast to the tension, sipped a glass of wine, her smile enigmatic. Miss Clara Winthrop's knitting needles clicked with relentless precision, while Dr. Lionel Baxter, his spectacles fogged, scribbled in his journal, his hands trembling. Poirot stood at the centre of the room, his small figure commanding attention. Mesdames et messieurs, he began, his voice clear and deliberate. The murder of Sir Reginald Haverford is a crime of passion, not of chance. The dagger, the cream, the letter, these are the tools of a killer who seeks to hide among you. But the heart, it betrays the guilty. I ask you now to speak of Sir Reginald, not as a victim, but as a man. What did he mean to you?
The room fell silent, the only sound the faint creak of the yacht and the distant lapping of waves. Then, unexpectedly, Beatrice Langley spoke, her voice trembling. He was cruel, not always in words, but in how he looked at people, how he controlled them. He made Charles feel small, always reminding him of that debt. Evelyn too. He'd laugh at her, call her his pretty ornament when he thought no one was listening. Lady Evelyn's face went white, her hands trembling. "That's not true," she whispered, but her voice lacked conviction.
Reginald loved me. He provided for me.
Poirot's eyes softened, but his tone was firm. Madame Haverford, the truth is a heavy burden, but it must be carried. Was your husband's love conditional? Did he hold power over you, as he did over Monsieur Vernon? Lady Evelyn's lips parted, and for a moment it seemed she would deny it. Then, with a choked sob, she broke. "He was impossible," she said, her voice raw. "He controlled everything, my clothes, my friends, my every move. He said the sapphire was my future, but it was his obsession, not mine. I hated him sometimes, but I didn't kill him." The room gasped, and Roger Langley stepped forward, his voice sharp. "Evelyn, you don't have to say this. Poirot, you're pushing her too far." Poirot raised a hand, his gaze unyielding. "Monsieur Langley, the truth requires pressure, like a diamond formed in the earth. Madame Haverford, where was the sapphire kept?" Lady Evelyn wiped her eyes, her voice steadier. "In our cabin, in a locked safe. Reginald carried the key on a chain around his neck." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And this key, was it on his person when he died?" She hesitated, then shook her head. I don't know. I didn't see it." Poirot made a note, then turned to Mrs. Dubois. "Madame, you spoke of the sapphire with Sir Reginald. Did he mention where it was kept?" Mrs. Dubois' smile was faint, her eyes sharp. "He said it was safe, but he was nervous. He hinted that someone on board wanted it, not for its value, but to hurt him." A murmur ran through the group, and Miss Winthrop's needles paused. "Hurt him," she said tartly. "That sapphire was his pride and joy. If someone wanted to hurt him, they'd have taken it and thrown it into the sea." Poirot's gaze flicked to her. "An interesting thought, Mademoiselle Winthrop. And you, Dr. Baxter, did Sir Reginald ever speak of the sapphire's safety?" Baxter adjusted his spectacles, his voice hesitant. "He mentioned it once, said he'd insured it for a fortune, but he was more worried about his business rivals than the sapphire itself. He thought someone was sabotaging his deals." Poirot nodded, his pen scratching. "Merci. You have all given me much to consider. For now, return to your cabins. The truth is near, but it requires reflection." As the guests dispersed, Hastings pulled Poirot. "Vernon's shame?" Madame Dubois's calm. "These are the currents beneath the surface. But the sapphire, it is not the motive, though it plays a part. We must find that key." They returned to the deck, where Poirot examined the area around the rail once more. The faint scratch now clearer in his mind, as a possible mark from a ring or bracelet, drew his attention. He ran his fingers along the wood, then paused, his eyes narrowing. "Hastings, look here. A tiny thread caught in the grain of the wood." Hastings squinted, barely making out a fine, dark thread, snagged on the rail. "A thread? From clothing, maybe?" "Perhaps," Poirot said, carefully extracting it with tweezers and placing it in a small envelope. "It is silk, I think. We shall compare it to the garments of those aboard." As they moved to the cabin where Sir Reginald's body had been placed, Poirot examined the clothing carefully. The key to the safe, as Lady Evelyn had said, was missing from the chain around Sir Reginald's neck. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The key, Hastings. It is the pivot of this crime.
Whoever took it knows where this sapphire is, and perhaps why Sir Reginald died. Hastings' mind raced. The killer took it to get the sapphire? Or to make it look like a robbery? Poirot shook his head. Non, mon ami. The sapphire is a symbol, not the prize. The motive is personal. Anger, betrayal, revenge. The key will lead us to the truth. As night fell, the sapphire yacht remained a crucible of secrets, its passengers caught in a web of lies and emotions. Poirot, with his relentless logic, was closing in, but the killer, sensing the tightening net, was poised to act, their desperation a shadow lurking in the yacht's gilded halls. Chapter 9. The Trap. The sapphire yacht lay shrouded in the stillness of the third night since Sir Reginald Haverford's murder, its lanterns casting flickering shadows across the deck. The sea whispered secrets, its rhythm a counterpoint to the mounting tension aboard. Hercule Poirot, his cream suit impeccable despite the late hour, stood in the captain's quarters, his notebook a testament to his relentless pursuit of the truth. Captain Arthur Hastings, his nerves taut as a bowstring, leaned against the wall, his eyes fixed on Poirot's meticulous notes. The discovery of the silk thread and the missing key to the sapphire's safe had deepened the mystery, and Poirot's calm suggested he was preparing to spring a trap. Poirot.
Racing? You're planning something, aren't you? A confrontation? Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing at his lips. A confrontation, oui, but not with accusations. The trap is set with psychology, Hastings. We shall gather the players and watch them betray themselves. Poirot had requested a final gathering in the salon before the police, under Inspector Hargreaves, made their anticipated arrest of Charles Vernon. The inspector, growing impatient, had agreed, though his skepticism of Poirot's methods was evident. The guests assembled, their faces a gallery of exhaustion, fear, and barely concealed hostility. Lady Evelyn Haverford sat rigidly, her mourning dress a stark contrast to her pale face, her hands twisting a handkerchief. Roger Langley and Beatrice Langley stood close, their eyes wary. Charles Vernon, under the constable's watchful gaze, glower, his fists clenched. Mrs. Violette Dubois, her elegance unshaken, sipped a glass of wine, her smile enigmatic. Miss Clara Winthrop's knitting needles clicked with relentless precision, while Dr. Lionel Baxter, his spectacles fogged, clutched his journal as if it were a lifeline. Poirot stood at the centre of the salon, his small figure commanding silence. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice clear and deliberate. "The murder of Sir Reginald Haverford is a crime of precision, not passion. The dagger, the cream, the missing key, these are not accidents, but choices. Tonight, I shall reveal what I have learned, and I ask you to listen carefully, for the truth is among you." A murmur ran through the group, eyes darting nervously. Inspector Hargreaves, standing by the door, crossed his arms, his expression skeptical. Poirot continued, his tone measured but piercing. "Let us begin with the scene of the crime. Sir Reginald was stabbed on the deck at 9:15 p.m. with a dagger from Captain Barrett's collection. A glass of whisky was shattered, a damp patch of cream, matching that of Madame Dubois, was found nearby, and a silk thread was caught on the rail near a faint scratch." Mrs. Dubois' smile faltered, her eyes narrowing. "Monsieur Poirot, I have told you I applied my cream in my cabin after the murder. You cannot think I—" Poirot raised a hand, silencing her. "Patience, madame. The cream is a clue, but not yet a verdict. Let us consider the key to the safe, which held the Haverford sapphire. It was missing from Sir Reginald's body.
Who took it? And why?
Lady Evelyn's voice was sharp.
I told you, Monsieur Poirot, I don't know where—
Didn't. Someone planted it to make me look guilty.
Poirot nodded, his expression thoughtful. The letter. Oui. It is a convenient clue? Too convenient? And the silk thread, dark, fine, from a garment of quality. I have examined the clothing of those aboard, and it matches the fabric of a shawl owned by Mademoiselle Winthrop.
The knitting needle stopped, and Miss Winthrop's eyes widened.
My shawl? That's preposterous. I was in the salon knitting when the scream came. I haven't worn that shawl since yesterday morning.
Poirot's smile was faint.
And yet, mademoiselle, the thread was found where Sir Reginald died. Perhaps you dropped it earlier. Or perhaps someone borrowed your shawl to mislead us.
A gasp rippled through the room, and Roger Langley stepped forward, his voice sharp. This is absurd, Poirot. You're accusing everyone, grasping at straws. Why not focus on Vernon? He had the motive, the opportunity. Beatrice cut him off, her voice trembling.
Roger, stop. You're making it worse. Charles didn't do this, and you know it.
Poirot's eyes gleamed, catching the tension between them.
Monsieur Langley, your defense of Madame Haverford and your accusation of Monsieur Vernon are noted. But let us consider another detail, the scream. Dr. Baxter, you said it came before the fatal blow. Why would Sir Reginald scream before he was stabbed?
Baxter adjusted his spectacles, his voice unsteady. I can't be certain. Perhaps he saw the killer approaching, or felt a threat. Poirot nodded, his gaze sweeping the room.
Or perhaps the scream was not Sir Reginald's. Perhaps it was a distraction, meant to draw us to the deck at the precise moment of the crime.
The room fell silent, the weight of Poirot's words sinking in. Hastings, watching from the side, felt a chill. Poirot, he whispered, you're saying someone else screamed to cover the murder? Poirot's voice was low, meant only for Hastings.
Précisément, mon ami. The scream, the cream, the thread. These are the tools of a clever mind, orchestrating a performance. And now we shall push them to the edge.
He turned back to the group, his tone commanding.
I propose a test. Each of you will provide a sample of your clothing, any item of silk, particularly shawls or scarves. We shall compare them to the thread, and I ask Captain Barrett to open the safe in Sir Reginald's cabin. If the sapphire is there, it will tell us much.
A murmur of protest rose, but Poirot's authority held firm. Captain Barrett nodded, leading Poirot and Hastings to the Haverford's cabin, where the safe was embedded in the wall. The guests, under Hargreaves's supervision, remained in the salon, their faces a mix of fear and defiance.
Empty. Hastings' jaw dropped. It's gone, Poirot. The killer took it. Poirot's eyes narrowed, his voice soft but intense. Or it was never there, Hastings. The sapphire is a symbol, not the prize. The key, the thread, the cream, these point to a motive deeper than greed. As they returned to the salon, Poirot addressed the group once more. The sapphire is missing, as is the key. But I believe the killer is among you, and they are growing desperate. Tonight, I ask you to reflect on your secrets. The truth cannot hide forever. The guests dispersed, their faces pale, their eyes darting. Hastings pulled Poirot aside. You're tightening the noose, Poirot. At business with the thread and the safe. It's rattled them. But who's the killer? Poirot's smile was faint, but resolute. The trap is set, Hastings. The killer is clever, but they have made a mistake. The scream, the thread, the cream, they are not accidents, but choices. Tomorrow we shall reveal the truth. The Sapphire yacht was a crucible of deception, its passengers caught in Poirot's tightening net. The killer, sensing the end, was poised to act, their desperation a shadow lurking in the yacht's gilded halls. Chapter 10. The Review. The sapphire yacht lay bathed in the soft glow of dawn, its polished deck gleaming under the first light of the third day since Sir Reginald Haverford's murder. The sea was calm, a deceptive mirror reflecting the tension that gripped the vessel. Hercule Poirot, his cream suit as immaculate as ever, stood in the salon, his notebook closed, his green eyes sharp with the certainty of revelation. Captain Arthur Hastings, his nerves stretched taut by 3 days of suspicion and half-truths, stood beside him, his heart pounding with anticipation. The guests, summoned for what Poirot had declared would be the final gathering, filed in, their faces pale and drawn. Inspector Hargreaves, his patience worn thin, loomed by the door, ready to act on Poirot's conclusions or make his own arrest. The salon was a crucible of emotion, the air thick with the scent of coffee and the weight of expectation. Lady Evelyn Haverford sat rigidly, her morning dress a stark contrast to her ashen face, her hands clutching a handkerchief. Roger Langley and Beatrice Langley stood close, their eyes wary, their hands clasped tightly. Charles Vernon, still under suspicion, glowered from a corner, his fists clenched. Mrs. Violet Dubois, her elegance unshaken, sat with a faint smile, her dark eyes watchful. Miss Clara Winthrop's knitting needles lay still, her sharp gaze fixed on Poirot. Dr. Lionel Baxter, his spectacles fogged, clutched his journal.
A key. These are the threads of a tapestry, and now, with the little grey cells, I shall reveal the picture they form. A murmur ran through the room, eyes darting nervously. Inspector Hargreaves crossed his arms, his skepticism evident. Poirot continued, his tone measured but relentless. Let us begin with the scene of the crime. Sir Reginald was stabbed at 9:15 p.m. on the starboard deck with a dagger from Captain Barrett's collection. A glass of whisky was shattered. A patch of cream matching that of Madame Dubois was found nearby. A silk thread from Mademoiselle Winthrop's shawl was caught on the rail, and the key to the sapphire's safe was missing. Mrs. Dubois' smile faltered, her voice sharp. Monsieur Poirot, I have said I applied my cream after the murder. You cannot. Poirot raised a hand, silencing her. Patience, madame. The cream is a clue, but not the verdict. Let us reconstruct the night. Sir Reginald left the salon, as the steward, Monsieur Riley, confirmed, around 9:05 p.m. He was alone on deck, or so it seemed. At 9:15, a scream drew us to the scene, where we found him dead, stabbed through the heart. Hastings leaned forward, his voice low. Poirot, you said the scream might not have been Sir Reginald's. Was it a distraction? Poirot nodded, his eyes gleaming. Précisément, Hastings. The scream was not Sir Reginald's. It was a woman's, meant to draw attention at the precise moment of the murder. But let us examine the clues in order. He turned to the group, his gaze sweeping over them. The dagger was taken from Captain Barrett's locked case, to which only he had the key. Yet Sir Reginald visited the captain's quarters at 7 p.m., agitated. Speaking of the sapphire's safety, it is possible he saw the dagger then, or that another gained access. The cream, found on the deck, matches Madame Dubois', yet she claims she applied it later. The silk thread from Mademoiselle Winthrop's shawl suggests her presence. Yet she was in the salon. And the key to the sapphire's safe, missing from Sir Reginald's body, points to a motive beyond simple murder. Lady Evelyn's voice trembled. The sapphire, it's gone, isn't it? You said the safe was empty. Poirot's smile was faint. The safe was empty, oui. But the sapphire is not the motive. It is a distraction, a red herring to blind us to the truth. Let us consider the relationships. Sir Reginald was a man of power, but his power bred resentment. Madame Haverford, you confessed to hating him for his control. Monsieur Vernon, you owed him a debt that humiliated. It was a woman's.
and it came before the fatal blow, as Dr. Baxter confirmed. Who screamed, and why? Beatrice's face paled, her voice barely a whisper. It wasn't me. I was with Roger at the bow. Poirot's gaze softened, but his tone was firm. Mademoiselle Langley, your loyalty to your brother is admirable, but it blinds you. The scream was yours, was it not? The room gasped, and Beatrice's eyes widened. No! I didn't. Charles Vernon stepped forward, his voice hoarse. Leave her alone, Poirot. She didn't scream. She was with Langley, like she said. Poirot's eyes gleamed, catching the crack in Charles's voice. Monsieur Vernon, your defense is telling, but the truth is this. The scream was a signal, a planned distraction, and the killer is Dr. Lionel Baxter. A stunned silence fell, broken by Baxter's choked protest. Me? That's absurd. I was in the salon, reading my journal. Poirot's voice was relentless. No, doctor. You were on the deck, and you struck the fatal blow. Let me explain. The dagger was taken from Captain Barrett's case, likely during Sir Reginald's visit at 7 p.m., when you were seen near the captain's quarters by the steward. You knew of the collection, having treated Captain Barrett for a minor ailment earlier that day. The cream was taken from Madame Dubois' cabin, applied to your hands to leave a false trail. The silk thread was from Mademoiselle Winthrop's shawl, which you borrowed under the pretense of admiring it that morning. Baxter's face drained of color, his spectacles slipping. This is madness! Why would I kill him? Poirot's tone was cold. Motive, doctor, is in your past. Sir Reginald was your patient, but also your ruin. Years ago, he invested in your medical practice, then withdrew his funds, leaving you in debt. You came aboard to confront him, to demand repayment, but he refused, mocking you. You planned the murder, using the scream arranged with an unwitting accomplice, Mademoiselle Langley, to cover your act. Beatrice gasped, tears streaming. No, I didn't know. He asked me to scream, said it was a prank. Poirot nodded. You were manipulated, mademoiselle. Dr. Baxter stabbed Sir Reginald, then dropped the cream and thread to implicate others. The key he took to suggest a robbery, but the sapphire was never in the safe. It was in Sir Reginald's pocket, found by the police this morning. Baxter's hands trembled, his voice breaking. You can't prove this. Poirot's eyes were unyielding. The scratch on the rail, doctor, it matches your cufflink, which I found. Baxter away. The room erupted in whispers. Lady Evelyn sobbed quietly, Roger Langley comforting her. Beatrice clung to Charles, her tears flowing. Mrs. Dubois' smile was gone, her eyes thoughtful. Miss Winthrop resumed her knitting, her expression unreadable. Poirot turned to Hastings, his voice soft. The trap, Hastings. It catches the guilty, but it wounds all. The truth is a bitter medicine. The Sapphire Yacht was no longer a prison, but a stage where the drama had played out. Poirot, with his relentless logic, had unravelled the web. But the scars of betrayal and loss lingered, as the sea whispered its eternal secrets. Chapter 11. The Reflection. The Sapphire Yacht lay serene under the midday sun, its polished deck gleaming, as if untouched by the tragedy that had unfolded over the past 3 days. The sea stretched endlessly around it, a mirror of calm that belied the storm of emotions now settling among its passengers. Hercule Poirot, his cream suit as immaculate as ever, stood at the stern, his hands clasped behind his back, his green eyes fixed on the horizon. Captain Arthur Hastings, still reeling from the dramatic revelation in the salon, joined him, his military bearing softened by the weight of what they had witnessed. Dr. Lionel Baxter, unmasked as Sir Reginald Haverford's killer, was now in the custody of Inspector Hargreaves, confined to a cabin under guard until the yacht reached port. The air, though warm, carried a chill of resolution, and the guests, scattered across the deck, seemed to move in a daze, their secrets laid bare. "Poirot," Hastings said, his voice low. "You did it again. Baxter. I never would have suspected him. That business with the cream, the thread, the cufflink. It was like watching a magician pull a rabbit from a hat. But how did you know?" Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile playing at his lips. "Mon ami, the little grey cells, they do not rely on magic, but on order and method. The truth is like a puzzle. Each piece, no matter how small, has its place. The cream, the thread, the scream, they were not accidents, but choices, and choices reveal the mind of the guilty." Hastings leaned against the rail, his gaze drifting to the sea. "It's a grim business, though. Baxter seems so ordinary. A doctor, driven to murder over a debt. And poor Beatrice, manipulated into that scream. She'll carry that guilt for years." Poirot nodded, his expression thoughtful. "The human heart, Hastings. It is both fragile and fierce. Dr. Baxter was not born a killer, but resentment. It festers like a wound. Sir Reginald's cruelty, his power over others.
Murder lingered. Lady Evelyn Haverford, no longer the grieving widow, but a woman freed from a tyrant's grip, sat alone in the salon, her face a mask of quiet relief. Roger Langley and Beatrice Langley walked arm in arm along the deck, their heads bent close, their voices low. Charles Vernon, cleared of suspicion, stood at the bow, his expression still sullen, but softened by his sister's presence. Mrs. Violette Dubois, her enigmatic smile restored, lounged in a deck chair, reading a novel, as if the past 3 days had been a mere diversion. Miss Clara Winthrop, her knitting resumed, sat nearby, her sharp eyes watching the others with undiminished scrutiny. Hastings turned to Poirot, his voice hesitant. "What about the sapphire? It was in Sir Reginald's pocket, not the safe. Why the charade with the key?" Poirot's eyes gleamed, his voice soft but precise. "The sapphire, Hastings, was a symbol of Sir Reginald's power, his pride. He kept it close, not in the safe, to taunt those who coveted it, or feared it. The missing key was a distraction, created by Dr. Baxter to suggest a robbery. But the motive was not greed, it was vengeance. Baxter's ruin at Sir Reginald's hands drove him to act, and the sapphire was merely a prop in his performance." Hastings shook his head, marveling. "You saw through it all? The cream, the thread, the scream. But that cufflink, how did you know it was Baxter's?" Poirot's smile was faint but satisfied. "The scratch on the rail, Hastings. It was too precise for a shoe, too shallow for a tool. I observed Dr. Baxter's cufflinks during our interviews, noting their unique design, a silver anchor with a sharp edge. When I examined his cabin, I found one cufflink missing, and the other bore a faint scratch, matching the mark on the rail. It was a small detail, but the little grey cells, they seize upon such things." Hastings chuckled, a note of relief in his voice. "You're a marvel, Poirot. But what now? The case is solved. Baxter's in custody. Will you stay on the yacht until we reach port?" Poirot shook his head, his gaze returning to the sea. "No, mon ami. My work here is done. The truth has been revealed, and justice will follow. I've arranged for a motorboat to take me to shore this afternoon. There are other puzzles awaiting Hercule Poirot, and the little grey cells, they crave new challenges." Hastings felt a pang of disappointment, though he was accustomed to Poirot's abrupt departures. "You leave us to face the aftermath, then? Lady Evelyn, Beatrice, they're still reeling." Poirot's expression softened, a rare glimpse of empathy in his precise demeanour. "The aftermath, Hastings, is for the living to navigate. Madame Haverford's duty, and it is fulfilled." As the motorboat approached, its engine a faint hum against the sea's rhythm, Poirot gathered his small case and adjusted his hat. The guests, informed of his departure, gathered on the deck to bid him farewell.
their expressions a mix of gratitude and unease. Lady Evelyn stepped forward, her voice steady. "Monsieur Poirot, thank you. You've given me clarity, if not peace." Poirot bowed, his manner courteous. "Madam, clarity is the first step to peace. I wish you well." Beatrice, her eyes still red from tears, offered a shy smile. "I'm sorry, Monsieur Poirot. I didn't know what I was doing." Poirot's gaze was kind. "Mademoiselle, the heart is easily led, but it is also resilient. Forgive yourself and move forward." Mrs. Dubois, her smile enigmatic, raised her glass. "A brilliant performance, Monsieur Poirot. You are as formidable as they say." Poirot's moustache twitched, a hint of amusement. "Madam, the stage is never as simple as it seems. Au revoir." Miss Winthrop, her knitting needles silent, nodded curtly. "You've stirred up quite a fuss, monsieur, but you got your man." Poirot inclined his head. "The truth, mademoiselle, is worth the fuss." As Poirot boarded the motorboat, Hastings stood at the rail, watching his friend depart. The yacht felt emptier without him, its opulence diminished by the weight of what had transpired. Inspector Hargreaves, overseeing Baxter's confinement, approached Hastings, his voice gruff. "He's a queer one, your Poirot, but I'll give him this, he's sharp as a tack." Hastings smiled, his eyes on the receding motorboat. "Sharper than you know, Inspector. Sharper than you know." As the Sapphire yacht prepared to return to port, its passengers carrying the scars of betrayal and loss, Poirot's figure grew smaller against the horizon, a solitary beacon of logic in a world of chaos. The sea whispered on, indifferent to the drama it had witnessed, and Hastings, left to reflect, knew that the little grey cells had once again triumphed, leaving behind a truth as clear and unyielding as the waves. The Sapphire yacht cut through the gentle swell of the English Channel, its engines humming as it made its slow return to the port of Torquay. The afternoon sun bathed the deck in a golden light, but the warmth did little to dispel the chill of unease that lingered among the passengers. Haverford sat in a deck chair, her morning dress stark against the polished teak, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Her face, once a mask of controlled grief, now bore a fragile determination, as if she were piecing together a new identity free from her husband's shadow. Roger Langley and Beatrice Langley walked arm in arm near the bow, their voices low, their glances cautious. Charles Vernon, exonerated but still brooding, leaned against the rail nearby, his eyes on his sister, his expression a mix of gratitude and guilt. Mrs. Violette Dubois, her elegance undimmed, reclined with a novel, though her eyes occasionally flicked to the others, as if assessing their recovery. Miss Clara Winthrop, her knitting resumed, sat in her usual spot, her needles clicking with a rhythm that seemed to measure the passing tension. Hastings sighed, running a hand through his hair. The case was solved, the killer in custody, yet something nagged at him, a lingering question, a thread left untied. He turned to Captain Barrett, who approached with a tray of tea, his grizzled face lined with fatigue. "Captain," Hastings said, accepting a cup, "it's over, but it doesn't feel finished. The sapphire, the lies, there's more to this, isn't there?" Barrett nodded, his voice gruff. "Aye, Captain Hastings. Sir Reginald was a hard man, made enemies wherever he went. Dr. Baxter was the one who snapped, but the rest of 'em, they all had their reasons to hate him. This yacht, it's a pretty cage, but a cage all the same." Hastings sipped his tea, his thoughts drifting to Poirot's departure. Poirot saw it all, the cream, the thread, the scream, but he left us to sort out the pieces. Typical of him, really. Barrett chuckled, a rare sound. "Your friend's a sharp one. Never seen a man pick apart a lie like that. But he's right to leave. The truth's out, and the rest is for the courts." As Barrett moved off, Hastings wandered toward the salon, where Inspector Hargreaves was reviewing his notes, preparing for the formalities upon reaching port. The inspector looked up, his expression a mix of grudging respect and irritation. "Captain Hastings," he said, "your Monsieur Poirot's a nuisance, but he's got a nose for it.
Baxter's confessed, spilled the whole story. Says Sir Reginald drove him to it, ruined his practice years ago. Still, a murder's a murder. Hastings nodded, his mind replaying Poirot's revelation. He planned it carefully, didn't he? The cream, the thread, all to throw us off. Hargreaves grunted. Too clever by half. That cufflink was his undoing. Poirot spotted it, and the rest fell into place. But I'll tell you, Hastings, this lot, they're still hiding things. Lady Evelyn's too calm, and that Dubois woman's too smug. Makes you wonder what else they know. Hastings frowned, his unease growing. You think there's more to it? Another crime? Hargreaves shrugged. Not my
job to chase shadows. Baxter's our man, and the sapphires accounted for, but these people, they're not clean, not one of them. Hastings left the salon, his thoughts troubled. He found Lady Evelyn alone, staring out a window, her hands still clutching her handkerchief. Lady Evelyn, he said gently, how are you holding up? She turned, her eyes weary but resolute. Captain Hastings, I'm free in a way I never expected. Reginald's death was horrible, but it's as if a weight has lifted. Does that make me a monster? Hastings shook his head, his voice kind. No, it makes you human. Poirot said Sir Reginald held power over you. You're allowed to feel relief. She nodded, a tear escaping. He was cruel in ways no one saw, but I didn't wish him dead. I just wanted to breathe. Hastings offered a reassuring smile, then moved to the deck where Beatrice and Roger were talking quietly. Beatrice looked up, her face still pale from the ordeal. Captain Hastings, is it really over? Charles is safe, but I can't stop thinking about what I did. That scream. Hastings placed a hand on her shoulder. You were used, Miss Langley. Poirot said you were a pawn, not a culprit. Forgive yourself. Roger's voice was firm. She will in time. We'll get through this, together. Charles, overhearing, approached, his expression softer than before. I owe Poirot everything. That letter, it could have ruined me, but I still feel dirty being part of this. Hastings nodded, understanding the weight of guilt. You're clear, Vernon. Focus on your sister. She needs you now. As he moved away, Hastings caught sight of Mrs. Dubois, her novel abandoned, her eyes fixed on the sea. He approached, curious. Mrs. Dubois, you seem remarkably composed. Most would be shaken. Her smile was enigmatic, her voice smooth. Captain Hastings, I've seen much in my life. A murder, even one so dramatic, is but a chapter. Monsieur Poirot was entertaining, but life moves on. Hastings frowned, sensing a depth to her words he couldn't grasp. You and Sir Reginald were close. Did you know about his enemies? Her eyes flickered, but her smile held. He had many, Captain, but I prefer to keep my own counsel. The past is the past. Hastings left her, his unease growing. He found Miss Winthrop, her knitting a steady rhythm. Miss Winthrop, he said, you saw more than you let on, didn't you? That thread from your shawl, it nearly pointed to you. Her lips pursed, her eyes sharp. I saw plenty, Captain. People's true faces come out in a crisis. But I didn't kill him.
Smudge on the horizon, Hastings felt a pang of longing for Poirot's clarity. The little grey cells had solved the crime, but the human cost, the broken trust, the exposed wounds, lingered. He returned to the stern, where the sea stretched endlessly behind them. The sapphire yacht was no longer a prison, but its passengers carried their burdens ashore. Hastings thought of Poirot, now far away, his mind already turning to a new puzzle. You left us to clean up the mess, old friend, he murmured, a wry smile tugging at his lips. But you got your man. As the yacht drew closer to port, the passengers prepared to disembark, their lives forever altered by the truth Poirot had uncovered. The sea, indifferent, whispered on, and Hastings, standing alone, knew that some mysteries, though solved, left echoes that would never fade. Chapter 13. The Shadows of Truth. The sapphire yacht drew ever closer to the port of Torquay, its sleek silhouette cutting through the late afternoon waves with a deceptive grace.
The sun hung low, casting long shadows across the deck, where the passengers moved with the cautious deliberation of those emerging from a storm. The revelation of Dr. Lionel Baxter as Sir Reginald Haverford's murderer had lifted the immediate threat of suspicion, but the air remained heavy with the residue of secrets and strained alliances. Captain Arthur Hastings stood at the rail, his hands clasped behind his back, his gaze fixed on the approaching coastline. The weight of the past 3 days pressed upon him, a mix of relief at the case's resolution and unease at the lingering questions Poirot's departure had left unanswered. The deck was quieter now, the opulent trappings of the yacht seeming almost garish in the wake of tragedy. Lady Evelyn Haverford, her morning dress a stark contrast to the vibrant sea, sat alone in a deck chair, her face composed but her eyes distant, as if she were navigating an internal map of her new reality. Roger Langley and Beatrice Langley lingered near the bow, their conversation hushed, their glances wary. Charles Vernon, cleared of guilt but not of his brooding nature, stood apart, his hands shoved into his pockets, his gaze on the horizon. Mrs. Violette Dubois, her elegance untouched by the ordeal, reclined with her novel, though her eyes flicked to the others with a calculating air. Miss Clara Winthrop, her knitting needles clicking softly, sat in her usual spot, her sharp gaze missing nothing. Hastings sighed, his thoughts drifting to Poirot's methodical unravelling of the crime. The little grey cells had triumphed, as always, but the human toll, the fractured relationships, the exposed betrayals, lingered like a bruise. He turned to find Captain Barrett.
Ship's not the same. Hastings nodded, his voice quiet. It's never the same after something like this. Poirot saw through the lies, but the truth doesn't erase the damage. Lady Evelyn, Beatrice, they're free in a way, but at what cost? Barrett grunted, adjusting his cap. Sir Reginald was a hard man. Made enemies like most men make debts. Baxter was the one who broke, but any of them could have, given time. Hastings' brow furrowed. That's what bothers me, Barrett. Poirot caught the killer, but there's still something off. Mrs. Dubois, for instance, she's too calm, too untouched. And that letter in Vernon's cabin, it was too convenient. Barrett's eyes narrowed. You think there's more to it? Another plot? Hastings shook his head, uncertain. I don't know. Poirot would say I'm chasing shadows, but I can't shake the feeling there's another layer he didn't uncover. As Barrett moved off to check the engines, Hastings wandered toward the salon, where Inspector Hargreaves was finalizing his report. The inspector looked up, his expression a mix of exhaustion and resignation. Hastings, he said, your friend Poirot's a marvel, I'll give him that. Baxter's confession ties it all up. Motive, means, opportunity. But this lot, he gestured toward the deck. They're still hiding things, always will. Hastings leaned against the doorframe, his voice thoughtful. You think there's more to the story? Something Poirot missed? Hargreaves snorted. Missed? Not likely. But these people, they're a nest of vipers. Lady Evelyn's too quick to play the freed widow, and that Dubois woman's got ice in her veins. Even Vernon, cleared or not, has a look about him. I'd wager there's secrets here that'll stay buried. Hastings nodded, his unease growing. He stepped onto the deck, approaching Lady Evelyn, who looked up with a faint smile. Captain Hastings, she said, her voice steady but soft. You've been kind through all this. I suppose I owe you thanks, as much as Monsieur Poirot. Hastings inclined his head, his tone gentle. No thanks needed, Lady Evelyn. You've been through a lot. How are you holding up? She sighed, her eyes drifting to the sea. I'm relieved in a way I can't quite explain. Reginald was a cage, even if I didn't see it at the time. But the sapphire, it's strange knowing it was in his pocket all along. He always said it was my future, but it feels like a chain now. Hastings frowned, recalling Poirot's words. A symbol, not a prize. Poirot thought it meant more to him than its value. Did he ever say why it mattered so much? Lady Evelyn's lips tightened, a flicker of something, guilt, perhaps, crossing her face. He said it was his triumph, proof he'd outsmarted his rivals. But he was paranoid about it, always checking it,
always watching me. I think he didn't trust me. Hastings's heart sank, sensing the depth of her pain. You're free now, Lady Evelyn. The sapphire doesn't define you. She nodded, a tear escaping. I hope you're right, Captain. He moved toward Beatrice and Roger, who were deep in conversation. Beatrice looked up, her face still pale, but her eyes brighter. Captain Hastings, she said, I can't thank you enough for standing by Charles. I was so afraid he'd be blamed. Hastings smiled, his voice warm. Poirot saw the truth, Miss Langley. You and your brother are clear, but take care of him. He's carrying a lot. Roger's expression hardened. He'll be fine, Hastings. We all will once we're off this cursed yacht. Charles, overhearing, approached, his voice low. I'm not fine, Langley. I owed Sir Reginald, yes, but I didn't kill him. Still, I feel like I'm marked, like everyone's watching me. Hastings placed a hand on his shoulder. The truth's out, Vernon. Let the rest go. As he moved away, Hastings caught sight of Mrs. Dubois, her novel closed, her eyes fixed on him. He approached, his curiosity piqued. Mrs. Dubois, you seem remarkably untouched by all this. Most would be shaken. Her smile was enigmatic, her voice smooth. Captain Hastings, I have learned to weather storms. Sir Reginald's death was unfortunate, but life continues. Monsieur Poirot's performance was impressive, but it changes little for me. Hastings' eyes narrowed. You were close to Sir Reginald. Did you know about his enemies, or the sapphire's significance? Her gaze flickered, but her smile held. He had many enemies, Captain, and the sapphire was his pride. But I keep my own counsel. Some truths are better left alone. Hastings left her, his unease deepening. He found Miss Winthrop, her knitting a steady rhythm. Miss Winthrop, he said, you saw through a lot of this, didn't you? That thread from your shawl, it nearly pointed to you. Her lips pursed, her eyes sharp. I saw enough, Captain. People hide their claws, but they're there. That shawl was taken to make me look guilty, but Poirot saw through it. Still, I wonder, who took it and why? Hastings nodded, his mind racing. As the yacht neared port, the passengers prepared to disembark, their lives forever altered. The truth had been revealed, but the shadows of doubt lingered, whispering of secrets that might never see the light. Hastings thought of Poirot, now far away, his little grey cells already turning to a new puzzle. You left us with the echoes, old friend, he murmured, watching the coastline grow closer, and violet. The gentle hum of the engines and the soft lapping of waves against the hull marked the end of a journey that had begun in luxury and ended in tragedy. The passengers, their faces etched with the strain of the past 3 days, gathered their belongings, preparing to disembark into a world forever altered by the murder of Sir Reginald Haverford. Captain Arthur Hastings stood at the rail, his military bearing softened by the weight of reflection. The resolution of the case, so deftly unravelled by Hercule Poirot, had brought justice, but the human cost lingered like a fog over the sea. The deck, once a stage for opulent revelry, now felt subdued, its polished teak and gleaming brass a stark contrast to the somber mood. Lady Evelyn Haverford, her mourning dress immaculate, stood near the gangway, her eyes fixed on the approaching shore. Her face, though composed, bore the traces of a woman grappling with newfound freedom and its accompanying guilt. Roger Langley and Beatrice Langley, their hands clasped tightly, spoke in low tones, their glances flickering toward Charles Vernon, who stood alone, his brooding expression softened by the relief of exoneration. Mrs. Violette Dubois, her elegance undimmed, adjusted her hat with a practiced grace, her enigmatic smile hinting at secrets she would never share. Miss Clara Winthrop, her knitting packed away, surveyed the scene with her usual sharp-eyed scrutiny, her lips pursed as if tallying the moral failings of those around her. Hastings sighed, his thoughts drifting to Poirot's absence.
The little Belgian detective, with his relentless logic and unerring insight, had left the yacht in a motorboat, his work complete. Yet the echoes of his investigation lingered, stirring questions that refused to settle. Hastings approached Captain Barrett, who was overseeing the docking, his grizzled face lined with the fatigue of a man who had seen too much. "Captain," Hastings said, his voice low, "we're almost ashore, but it doesn't feel like an end. There's something unfinished." Barrett nodded, his eyes on the crew securing the lines. "Aye, Captain Hastings. A murder like this, it leaves scars. Your friend Poirot caught the killer, but the rest of them, they're carrying wounds you can't see. Sir Reginald was a poison, and his death didn't cleanse it all." Hastings's brow furrowed, his unease growing. "That's what troubles me. Mrs. Dubois, for instance, she's too composed, too detached. And Lady Evelyn, she's free now, but there's something in her eyes like she's hiding more than grief." Barrett's mouth tightened. "They all hide something. That's the way of the rich. Polished on the outside, rotten within. Poirot saw it, but he left it for us to live with." Hastings wandered toward the salon, where Inspector Hargreaves was finalizing his paperwork, preparing to transfer Dr. Lionel Baxter to the authorities ashore. The inspector looked up, his
Gruff demeanor softened by exhaustion. "Hastings," he said, "we'll have Baxter in a cell by nightfall. He's confessed everything. How Sir Reginald ruined him, how he planned the murder. Poirot tied it up neat as a bow." Hastings nodded, his voice thoughtful. "He did, but it's the others I'm thinking about. They all had reasons to hate Sir Reginald. Debts, control, betrayal. Baxter acted, but the rest, they're not innocent, are they?" Hargreaves snorted, closing his notebook. "Innocent? Not a one. Lady Evelyn's playing the widow, but she's glad he's gone. Vernon's debt made him a target, but he's got a temper. Langley's too quick to protect everyone, and that Dubois woman, she's a snake, mark my words. Even the old spinster, Winthrop, she sees more than she says." Hastings' eyes narrowed. "You think there's more to it? Another secret?" Hargreaves shrugged, his tone weary. "Maybe, but we've got our man, and the sapphires accounted for. The rest is just human nature, messy and mean." Hastings stepped back onto the deck, approaching Lady Evelyn, who stood alone, her hands clasped tightly. "Lady Evelyn," he said gently, "you'll be ashore soon. A new start, perhaps?" She turned, her eyes weary but resolute. "A new start, Captain Hastings? I hope so. Reginald's death, it's freed me, but it's also a weight. I keep wondering if I could have stopped him, changed him." Hastings shook his head, his voice kind. "You can't change a man like that. Poirot saw it. Sir Reginald's power hurt everyone. You're not to blame." A tear escaped, and she wiped it away. "Thank you, Captain. But the sapphire, it was his obsession, not mine. I don't know what I'll do with it now." Hastings moved toward Beatrice and Roger, who were gathering their luggage. Beatrice looked up, her face brighter but still shadowed. "Captain Hastings," she said, "I can't believe it's over. Charles is safe, but I keep hearing that scream in my head. I didn't know what Baxter was doing." Hastings placed a hand on her shoulder, his tone reassuring. "You were used, Miss Langley. Poirot said you were a pawn, not a villain. Let it go." Roger's voice was firm, but his eyes were troubled. "We'll help her, Hastings. But this yacht, it's cursed. I'll be glad to see the back of it." Charles approached, his expression softer. "I owe you and Poirot my life, Captain. That letter could have ruined me. But I still feel tainted." Hastings nodded, understanding the weight of guilt. "You're free, Vernon. Focus on what's ahead." He caught sight of Mrs. Dubois, her novel tucked under her arm, her smile as enigmatic as ever. He approached, his curiosity unabated. "Mrs. Dubois, "Reginald's death was a tragedy, but I choose not to dwell. Monsieur Poirot's brilliance was a fine distraction, but I look to the future." Hastings' unease deepened.
"You knew Sir Reginald well. Did he ever mention anything about his enemies beyond Baxter?" Her smile widened, but her eyes were guarded.
"He had many, Captain, but I keep my own secrets." The sapphire was his pride, but pride is a dangerous thing.
Hastings left her, his suspicions unresolved. He found Miss Winthrop, her knitting stowed, her sharp eyes scanning the deck. "Miss Winthrop," he said, "you saw through a lot of this. That thread from your shawl, it was a close call." Her lips pursed, her voice tart. "Too close, Captain. Someone used my shawl to point fingers." But Poirot saw the truth. "Still, I wonder who took it, and why they chose me." As the yacht docked, the passengers lined up to disembark, their faces a mix of relief and apprehension. The police took Dr. Baxter away, his head bowed, his confession a heavy chain. Hastings watched them go, his thoughts on Poirot's absence. The little grey cells had unravelled the murder, but the unseen wounds, the fractured trust, the hidden motives remained. The Sapphire yacht was no longer a prison, but its passengers carried its shadows ashore, each step a reminder of the cost of truth in a world of deception. Chapter 15. The Final Tide. The Sapphire yacht rested at the dock in Torquay, its sleek form tethered to the shore as the last light of dusk faded into a velvet night. The harbour was alive with the bustle of departure, crews securing lines, porters unloading luggage, and the faint hum of voices as the passengers prepared to step back into the world. The murder of Sir Reginald Haverford, solved by Hercule Poirot's relentless logic, had left an indelible mark on those aboard, and the air was thick with the bittersweet tang of closure and unresolved shadows. Captain Arthur Hastings stood at the gangway, his military bearings softened by a quiet melancholy, his eyes scanning the passengers as they disembarked, each carrying the weight of the past 3 days. The deck, once a stage for opulence and intrigue, now felt like a relic of a drama concluded but not forgotten. Lady Evelyn Haverford, her morning dress a stark silhouette against the harbour lights, paused at the gangway, her face a mask of resolve tinged with fragility. Roger Langley and Beatrice Langley, their hands clasped, moved slowly toward the shore, their faces pale but their steps determined. Charles Vernon, his brooding nature tempered by relief, followed close behind, his eyes on his sister, a silent vow of protection in his gaze. Mrs. Violette Dubois, her elegance as unshaken as ever, glided down the
Secrets. Hastings sighed, his thoughts heavy with the echoes of Poirot's investigation. The little Belgian detective with his unerring little grey cells had unravelled the web of deceit, exposing Dr. Lionel Baxter as the murderer. Yet the resolution, though brilliant, left behind a tapestry of human frailties, grief, guilt, and guarded truths that no arrest could fully mend. Hastings turned to Captain Barrett, who stood nearby, overseeing the final preparations for the yacht's handover to the authorities. "Captain," Hastings said, his voice low, "it's over, but it doesn't feel like an end. There's something about this lot, secrets they'll take to their graves." Barrett nodded, his grizzled face etched with the weight of the voyage. "Aye, Captain Hastings, your friend Poirot peeled back the lies, but these folks, they're built on 'em. Sir Reginald was a spark to a powder keg, and Baxter was just the one who lit it. The rest, they'll carry their own ghosts." Hastings's brow furrowed, his unease lingering. "Mrs. Dubois, especially, she's too calm, too detached. And Lady Evelyn, she's free now, but there's a shadow in her eyes. Even Vernon, cleared or not, seems haunted." Barrett adjusted his cap, his voice gruff. "That's the way of it with the rich. They hide their claws, but they're sharp. Poirot saw what mattered, but the rest? That's for them to live with." Hastings wandered toward the dock, where Inspector Hargreaves was supervising the transfer of Dr. Baxter to a police van. The doctor, his head bowed, his spectacles glinting in the harbour lights, looked diminished, a man broken by his own desperation. Hargreaves caught sight of Hastings and approached, his expression a mix of grudging respect and weariness. "Hastings," he said, "your Poirot's a devil for detail. Baxter's confessed it all, how Sir Reginald ruined him,
how he planned every step. The cream, the thread, that scream. It was a clever setup, but Poirot saw through it. Hastings nodded, his voice thoughtful. He always does, but the others? They're not clean, are they? There's more to their stories. Things Poirot didn't chase. Hargreaves snorted, his eyes scanning the passengers as they dispersed. Clean? Not a chance. Lady Evelyn's too quick to move on. Vernon's got a chip on his shoulder, and that Dubois woman. She's a cipher. Even the old spinster, Winthrop, knows more than she lets on. But we've got our man, and the sapphires in evidence. That's enough for the courts. Hastings's unease deepened, a nagging sense that the truth, though revealed, had left loose ends. He approached Lady Evelyn, who stood alone on the dock, her gaze fixed on the yacht. "Lady Evelyn," he said gently, "you're ashore now. A new chapter, perhaps." She turned, her eyes weary but
Heavy one. The sapphire. It's mine now. But it feels like a curse. Hastings frowned, recalling Poirot's words about the sapphire as a symbol. It was his pride, not yours. You can let it go. Start fresh. She nodded, a tear glistening. I'll try. Thank you, Captain. He moved toward Beatrice and Roger, who were waiting for a car to take them to their hotel. Beatrice looked up, her face softer, her eyes brighter. Captain Hastings, she said, I can't thank you enough. Charles is free, and I'm trying to forget that scream. But it's hard. Hastings smiled, his tone reassuring. You were used, Miss Langley. Poirot saw your heart was true. Lean on your brother and Mr. Langley. You'll find your way. Roger's voice was firm, but his eyes were troubled. We will, Hastings. This yacht was a nightmare, but we're done with it. Charles approached, his expression softer, but still shadowed. I owe Poirot my life, Captain. That letter could have destroyed me, but I still feel marked. Hastings placed a hand on his shoulder. You're clear, Vernon. Focus on what's ahead, for your sister's sake. He caught sight of Mrs. Dubois, her elegant figure moving toward a waiting car, her smile as enigmatic as ever. He approached, his curiosity unquenched. Mrs. Dubois, you've come through this unscathed. Most would be shaken. Her eyes gleamed, her voice smooth. Captain Hastings, I have learned to navigate storms. Sir Reginald's death was a tragedy, but I choose to look forward. Monsieur Poirot's brilliance was a fine spectacle, but it changes nothing for me. Hastings' eyes narrowed. You knew Sir Reginald well. Was there more to his story? Something you're not saying? Her smile widened, but her eyes were guarded. He had enemies, Captain, as powerful men do. The sapphire was his pride, but pride is a fragile thing. I keep my own counsel. Hastings left her, his suspicions unresolved. He found Miss Winthrop, her knitting bag slung over her shoulder, her sharp eyes scanning the dock. Miss Winthrop, he said, you saw more than most. That thread from your shawl, it was a close call. Her lips pursed, her voice tart. Too close, Captain. Someone used my shawl to stir trouble, but Poirot saw the truth. Still, I wonder who took it and why they chose me. People hide their true faces, but I see them. As the passengers dispersed into the night, Hastings stood alone, watching the sapphire yacht recede in.
The sapphire yacht was no more a prison, but its passengers carried its echoes into the world. Each step a reminder that truth, though revealed, could never fully heal the wounds it uncovered.